Since this is the first video in this particular series of content, I haven't had anybody ask me any questions, so I can't really do this section because it's the first video. But I want to do it because I want to have this be a section, if that makes sense. The first ever Ask Me Anything, I've got to make something up. I've got to pretend somebody's asked me something. Whatever it is, it's going to be disingenuous because nobody's actually asked me that question, and it's just like me rambling about a topic I want to talk about. It would be nice if from this video, either from the epic or from this individual, if anybody does watch this video and they could just ask some random question. I don't give a shit what that question is. It can be surreal or hyper philosophical or utterly mundane or outrageous or trollish or, well, trollish, the wonderful thing about trolls is, you ask them not to be trolls in the comments and they, that's lighting a fire under their butt. They're going to be right on the... You ask them to write something, because you need it for the content, and it's like, troll you, not going to write anything. So yeah, I don't really, it's nice to get, not have any trolls, but if you're bored, want a bit of a troll, just write some comment you think would be utterly outrageous, knock yourself out. And I'm not saying this for as my means to generate algorithmic attention or whatever. That's not the intention of it. The intention of it is for people to hopefully ask something that they want answered, that any other conventional method of asking for not information but thoughts about a topic probably wouldn't get answered by regular hoi polloi YouTubers or people they know or whatever. I'm a liberal. There's no topic under the sun that I'm like feel restricted to talk about. You know what I mean? Even if it's like, what's your favourite colour? It's amazing how much you can waffle about that. From an interesting point of view. But I don't want to go down that route for my my first video, because I'd waste probably the most common question that I'll get over the next however long this series lasts, either if it's just this episode and nobody says a bloody thing, or if I even get anybody watching it, or if I'm down in episode 2973, with the gone through the peaks and the troughs and just got like 30 people left, and one of them's still going to be asking, what's your favourite colour? So yeah, I don't want to do that. Save that for another day. Put that in the bank. So what I'll talk about, what I'll pretend somebody's asked me today is, what do I think about the current societal desire to get kids off of social media? This is quite an interesting topic for somebody making a YouTube video. And so I suppose theoretically everybody who makes YouTube videos should have a quite cogent thought on this by this point in time. I grew up when all this stuff was starting, and I've experienced it. I haven't experienced it as a kid, that's the thing. When it all started going off, the internet started getting going, I was probably about 23, something like that. 22, 23 maybe. So yeah, I don't have the experience of experiencing it as a child, but I have the experience of seeing it all progress from ground zero, as it were, the whole internet thing. And what I find interesting about this topic is that on YouTube, which is the social media that I have the most fun with, because I've always, when I was asked to decide what A-levels to do, I chose media studies because I thought media studies would be, teaching you how to make films and, wonderful naivety, and media studies was more about learning to be a critic than it was learning to be an artist. yeah, so I did that, and then I applied to when I'd done my A levels. Got terrible results, absolutely shite. I got two D's and a N, which meant nearly, you know, like a good nearly is there. And so that my university options were very limited, and my dreams of going to a decent film productions course at college were fairly much dashed. And I didn't really want to go down any more media studies routes because it's just learning to be a critic. I think most people are born critics. I don't think you need to learn to be a critic necessarily. You probably need to learn to be a good critic, but maybe not just a critic, because everyone's a critic, aren't they? Anyway, so yeah, the film production sort of avenue vanished from my sights, and I went and did a history degree at a dumpy, bottom of the barrel university or whatever. And that was nice. I liked history. That was like my second love in life. So, that was still nice. But my dream ended, when I was about 18 or 19. And then, of course, YouTube came along in the late zeros, mid to late zeros. And, wow, awesome. Yeah, you can just sort of like have a stab at making stuff. And, my content in those early years, most of it's still on there. I think I've only ever deleted a couple of videos, not because they were naughty, but because I just thought they were crap. They might not have been. You're always your own worst critic, aren't you? So back in those days when YouTube was just starting, they had a limit, or they had a rule. When you signed up, you had to be at least 13 years old. You weren't allowed to have officially, you weren't allowed to have a YouTube account unless you were 13 years old. So, people didn't make content for kids back then. All the content was for like adults or, late teenagers, whatever. Pretty much, adult content. If you go and see a movie that's a 15 or whatever that equivalent is in America, I don't know. In UK, you used to have a 15 certificate for movies. And generally speaking, that was sort of like for late teenagers to adults. And it would have pretty much all content except nudity. Or rather, strong nudity. The strong nudity or the outrageous gore, that would be R-rated or X-rated, or in the UK it's called an 18, And so that's what YouTube essentially was at the beginning. It was a sort of a late teenagers plus. So it was sort of like everything apart from outrageous nudity and or what we would call hardcore nudity, I suppose nowadays, or excessive gore, I suppose. Realistic gore. That wasn't medical related. Oh, I don't. I've never been into. Well, I had a friend that used to be into gore films, but I was never really into gore films. He liked the more gore in a movie, the more he liked it. And I only liked the gore films that were funny gore films, like Brain Dead or Bad Taste. Anyway, that's a bit of a diversion there. I do apologise about it. So yeah, YouTube was, essentially what would be classed as that sort of like 15 bracket. It would be like, pretty much your content was aimed at an adult basically, but not with the like, no porn or massive gore and all that kind of stuff. And so that's how we all made our content. After a few years, it's quite obvious that like 10-year-olds were getting hold of the internet and coming onto YouTube because it was a fun place to be. And there was loads of accounts that were like 10, 11, 12-year-olds, and they sort of became their own market, as it were. And I never targeted that market, but it was evident that it was there, if that makes sense. It sort of led to YouTube twigging onto the idea that they wanted to try and create YouTube Kids and, corner the kids market. Which from a business point of view, and from a reality point of view, might as well, But of course, as soon as you involve kids in anything, it all becomes controversial. Starts becoming controversial, doesn't it? That's the problem with kids, generally speaking. It's not the kids, it's not the content, it's Anyway, you know what I mean. You get kids involved in something, and all of a sudden everything comes under more scrutiny. And all of a sudden, the YouTube algorithm was not promoting videos that wouldn't be suitable for kids. The primary content. When you upload a video, there's a box that says, "Is this content suitable for children?" And if you tick no, your likelihood of getting in the search results was sort of, it's essentially a form of censorship, a sort of backdoor censorship. And it's like you can't have the word fuck in the title anymore, you can't have the word fuck in the content anymore, and the bullshit, the bullshit, the bullshit. And so, and this coincided with wanting more advertising, and then because the advertisers want to advertise to kids, and then you have content that's sort of like not designed for kids, but they're sticking the adverts for kids on it because it's a robot just shoving adverts out everywhere, and then there's controversy, and it all gets a bit messy, really. So I kind of stopped making content, not because I didn't want to make content anymore, but just because you felt the bullshit was becoming too aggressive, you know what I mean. And now that we've sort of like, we've gone the full circle now, and we're getting to the stage where we're saying again, well, why are the kids here? It's like, nothing against the kids. The kids are great, the content's great. But like, all the hairies are using it as an excuse to beat everybody up. And, making everything shitter. Reducing your ability to have interesting, engaging content. Not that this probably is that, but you know what I mean. When there's this sort of new panic about kids on the internet, kids on social media, regarding in the specific situation of YouTube, I'm actually for that. As much as I am a liberal-minded, whatever kind of person, at this point in time, I think it would be better if people could just, when they make a YouTube account, not have to worry about whether kids are watching it. I think that would be better for everybody, really, apart from the kids, of course. It's sort of like a regretful agreement. I'm not agreeing because I'm joining in the panic of the youth or whatever. I mean, the kids are just copying us, aren't they? It's just like, Anyway, but I am joining in with the idea just because, that might be a solution to enable us to have freer content again. Maybe I'm being naive. Maybe it's not an avenue to freer content. Maybe it's an avenue, the first step in further censorship. Maybe it's the first nail in the coffin. I don't know. If you just take it at face value, if the issue is just the kids, if the reason why we all have to make crap content is just because of the kids, and now we've decided that these people who have made, complain that we have to make crap content for kids, then, if they're now saying that actually no, that don't worry about that, we'll just take the kids off the media, you can go back to making decent content, fine. Yeah, I mean, that's something I can go along with. Hopefully something positive can come out of this, I mean, it's a bit of a shame that all those sort of like 10 to 12-year-olds that made the site a bit more popular and interesting back in the day, in that it was just hilarious to see a 10-year-old on a site where they weren't allowed to be, it was all part of the laugh, But, I don't know. Just sense of resignation, I suppose. As you go through each wave of bullshit, you have to try and adapt to whichever bullshit you're in at the moment. And I think if they got kids off social media somehow, then, well, I don't know about all the social medias, but in YouTube particularly, then I that would encourage me to make more videos, really, I suppose, because I could get back to making content where I didn't really give a shit if a kid was watching it or not, So, Ask me something more interesting than that. There must be things out there that are more interesting to waffle about.